Guardians of the Galaxy has been integral to the overall MCU expanding beyond the world. It was our first glances into what cosmic adventures might look like. But beyond the Guardians themselves, some of these characters had quite the impact on the overall story. I mean, Thanos was first seen in full form in the first film. These characters, while they don't have the most screen time, they have lore and interesting backstories which could be expanded on. But if we were looking today at alternative choices on who could play these roles, there's a different direction we could take them. But before we get started today, I'd like to thank today's sponsor, Surfshark. Now, Surfshark is a VPN that allows you to protect your data from it being breached, which is great. But if I'm being honest, I mainly use it to change my IP address so I can watch things that aren't available in my country. Like if you live in the States and you want to revisit some of those classic MCU films on Netflix, well, sorry, you're out of luck. Or you can change your IP address to Canada and watch the MCU without paying for Disney+. And the great thing about Surfshark is it allows unlimited devices. So use promo code BrianSeeker to get 83% off and 3 months extra free. And Surfshark is actually giving away their antivirus for free during the month of June. So check the link in the description below for more details. But for today's casting, I'm tackling Ego, the Collector, Nebula, Yondu, Mantis, and Ronan the Accuser. So let's recast the surrounding characters from Guardians of the Galaxy. First up, we have Yondu, maybe the best character outside the Guardians themselves. Michael Rooker definitely brings a different type of vibe here, and one that very few actors can do. He feels slimy but has heart. It's this kind of like trucker mindset. We need to have those mixed feelings about him, as well as have that kind of nature where you don't know what he's gonna do next. The perfect person beyond Rooker is Woody Harrelson. I mean, look no further than the roles he's been in the past. From Natural Born Killers to Zombieland, to even Solo.
You wanna know how I've survived as long as I have? I trust no one. Assume everyone will betray you and you will never be disappointed.
Sounds like a lonely way to live.
He's got the perfect vibe here. He can do cold, but always has that heart behind him, and he feels just slimy enough. So Woody Harrelson as Yondu. Next up, let's do Ronan the Accuser. Now, when talking about the first Guardians movie, the only really complaint you can have is about Ronan. He falls into that generic villain archetype that a lot of the MCU movies has. And although I do think that's true, I think he works well and plays his part in the movie. But if I had to change something, I would double down on that dominating force and his menace. Lee Pace does a good job here, but I always felt like there was a little bit of an act, especially with his voice. I want someone who has that physicality and that voice. That's why I went with Christopher Judge. Now, he's known for more of his motion capture performances, but I think he'd perfectly represent that comic book counterpart. His voice and his acting in God of War is some of the best I've ever seen, and I think he can do that dominating presence, especially in live action.
Your army was unable to fight?
Oh, we fought back.
So tell me then, is it true that negligence on your part is what first alerted the Wraith to your presence? That your reckless actions brought about the deaths of thousands of innocent people?
So Christopher Judge as Ronan. As for Ego, the living planet, I think Kurt Russell was amazing here. He was perfect for Chris Pratt's version and does exactly what's needed. Now, I went weird here. Maybe too weird, but instead of going with that cool, kind of hippie style dad, I tried to go with that connected, calming, that very down-to-earth dad, before eventually that turn. My first thought here was Mark Hamill, but I think he brings a little bit too much of that evil energy with his old age now, so instead I went with America's dad, Tom Hanks. Now, I know, weird, right? But if you think about this, when we first meet Ego, he always has this feeling of something being off and something that's about to boil over. Who better to make you feel calm and comfortable than the soft hands of Tom Hanks? He wouldn't bring that cool dad factor like I mentioned, yet a loving one. He would sit down and have a talk with our Peter Quill, make him feel like he's whole again, really fill that void in his heart. But when that realization hits, it will hit even harder. And think about how much fun it would be to see Tom Hanks in a villainous role going balls to the wall. I think it's weird, but it just might work.
Which team do you play for?
Well, I'm a peach.
Well, I was just wondering, because I couldn't figure out why you would throw home when we've got a 2-run lead. You let the tying run get on second, and we lost the lead because of you. Now you start using your head. That's that lump that's 3 feet above your ass.
So Tom Hanks is Ego. Next up, let's talk about Mantis. Another perfect cast here from Marvel. That soft and clueless character feels right at home within this team. She has this innocence that's really hard to translate. The only thing I would like to do is expand and see more on this character, and I think Constance Wu is the person to do that. She gives that sweet and innocent vibe in many of her roles. Like in Crazy Rich Asians, she just shows she has that perfect level of innocence, but I think she can also expand on that, bring a little bit more complexity, bring a little bit more weight to see what it was like to live with ego, and see how that really translates into her character.
So your family is, like, rich?
We're comfortable.
That is exactly what a super rich person would say. It's not a big deal, obviously. I just think it's kind of weird that I had no idea.
So Constant Wu as Mantis. Next up we have the Collector, who is a character I've always been interested in. He's got such an interesting backstory, and Benicio del Toro is one of my favorite working actors today. I feel like his weird and interesting persona is always something I want to see more of. Now I think this role is a great type of cameo, but I want to lean a little bit more into that weirdness and those almost unstable touches, and someone who can do that with that eccentric nature. That's why I went with Johnny Depp, who everyone always says needs a role in the MCU, and I think this one just fits like a glove. Although his acting in recent years hasn't always landed, a role like this one's just perfect. His weirdness and his character work would just elevate this character, and I think he could bring a little bit of that sadness that we saw in his Grindelwald. It just lines up perfectly with his character's backstory, with that sadness and that weirdness.
Thank you, Commodore, for getting us ready to make way. We've had a hard time of it by ourselves.
So Johnny Depp as the Collector. Lastly, we have Nebula. Of course, Nebula here needs that evil nature, as well as that unwillingness to compromise. She should move in that really interesting and disjointed way that the MCU kind of brought into her character. I always saw her as a character that almost felt like there was a glimmer of humanity coming through. Someone who doesn't look nor feel human, but it's clawing its way to the surface. Now, Cara Delevingne is not my favorite actress in the world, but honestly, I think she's made for this role. She's got this weird, almost alien, robotic nature to her that really fits. I think her in an understated performance would translate well, and even things like Suicide Squad, you could see her emotion playing a lot of that character. I think she'd really take this one and run with it. I think she'd do really well with the serious stuff, and show us that little bit of humanity coming through from time to time.
Hi. Yes, sure, of course. Bill, can I have my camera, please? Say cheese. Thank you, Bill.
She has this mean nature, and I think it would work well. So Cara Delevingne as Nebula. So what do you think of my choices for the surrounding characters in the Guardians of the Galaxy? Let me know your choices in the comments below. Next, we're going to be moving on to a new series, and I'm going to start tackling some real-life YouTubers as well as real-life people. Sorry my upload schedule hasn't been as consistent as of late. It's going to get a lot better. Life is just kind of caught up with me. But I'm going to start exploring in some shorts and just casting single people, as well as doing some new things on this channel. As always though, thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.